Welcome to the Remington Podcast, where we take a deep dive into all things ammunition. I'm your host, Audrey Mays, and today I'm here with research and development engineer, Leland Mason.
How's it going?
We are here today to talk about 10 millimeter. We had an episode previously about 9 millimeter, and we heard your comments and we got your emails, and
that's good.
10 mil it is.
Yeah, because 10 millimeter is by far my favorite cartridge ever for anything, any gun.
Yeah. You were telling me that you shot it yesterday.
I was literally shooting 10 millimeter for fun with a friend yesterday at the range. We took out my 10 mil, and first shot, it was just smiles.
Had little girly giggles the whole time, or what?
Girly giggles.
All right. Well, you know a lot about ammunition in general, but I was hoping you knew where 10 millimeter originated.
Yeah. So 10 mil is kind of one of those cartridges where people who are really into it already know this story and the details, because it is kind of like a cult classic at this point.
Okay.
But 10 millimeter has a very founded history right in the middle of like the height of modern handgun development technologies, which is like the 80s. Like everybody knows, like everything happened in the 80s for modern handguns. And that's right where 10 millimeter started in 1983. So 10 millimeter was basically a founded cartridge based off of a Wildcat, which, back up, Wildcat, for anybody who doesn't know, is a cartridge that is not basically mass produced. So
a lot of hand loaders.
Right. A lot of hand loading. Typically at a nominal caliber, 30 cal, 22 cal, whatnot, 40. But it's going to use a different case profile. You're going to have different specs, not covered in SAMI. Like, Wildcats are kind of like your custom hot rods. John, actually, in R&D, has a Wildcat that he draws his own cases out. So, like, he literally forms his cases from a parent case to make his Wildcat. So that's what people would do for the Wildcat 10 millimeter was based off of, which was 40 G&A, guns and ammo, is what G&A stands for. And essentially, the whole reason 40 G&A came about is at the time, in the early 80s, your two standards for handgun were 45 and 9 millimeter. 45 being the prominent one, everybody took the most serious. At the time, 45, at least in the United States, was it's gotten its positive reputation from the 1911 and its use in World War I, World War II, Vietnam. Right, it was a founded cartridge. People took it serious. 9 millimeter was kind of the new technology for the U.S. Again, like we've said, 9 millimeter is actually older than 45. It goes back before World War I with the Luger, but 9 millimeter was not as serious in the United States, at least.
At the time.
Yep, which, keep in mind, 40 G&A and 10 millimeter was a United States developed cartridge. That's why we're referencing the U.S., not other countries in the world. But anyways, 9 millimeter was coming into light. Around the 80s, you had the introduction of the Bred M9, replacing the Colt 45 1911 as the primary service pistol for the United States military. So 9 millimeter was, it's prominent enough, starting to get up and going, but it was considered a little anemic, which we'll get into that in a little bit too. It's an important tie-in. And then also, it didn't really compare performance-wise, at least in weight, to 45. So 9 millimeter is high capacity, light, fast. 45's low capacity, heavy, slow. 10 millimeter. At the time, 40 G&A was designed to be a 40 caliber bullet. So 9 millimeters caliber is 35.
Okay.
45 is 45 caliber. So what's in between 45 and 35? 40.
40.
Right.
Math.
Right.
Yeah.
So
quick math.
It's wonderful, isn't it? So 40 is the basis for that. And it didn't have a military designated like design, like optimized theory behind it. It like 9 mil or 40 did, or 45 did. They both were designed for military usage. 40 was just like at the time people saw the upbringing and increasing in popularity of semi-automatic handguns, and sometimes my lips get hit in my mouth. But anyways, but the 40 was supposed to be that stopgap between the two. So anyways, it was more of a kind of do it all, just like people were like, oh, you know what, we need something in between, not necessarily to fill a military contract. So a very, however, prominent figure in early 1980s and 70s, handgun combat techniques and operations and just thinking, was a instructor and head of gun sight, very prominent shooting school still operating today. His name was Colonel Jeff Cooper. So a lot of people know Jeff Cooper. He had a couple other big impactful ideals and processes that he added to the firearms industry, but one of them was his interest in 10 millimeter, which he, theorized. He used the basis of 40 G&A, and he said, I'd like that to be a caliber, but I want it to be a little bit more powerful. So Norma actually took him up on that and essentially created what he wanted, which was a 200 grain bullet at 1,200 feet per second.
So big and fast.
Big and fast.
Yeah.
So it takes literally the best of both worlds. You have 45s, typically your 185 to 230 grain bullets, less than 1,000 feet per second at or less, usually. Again, we're talking nominal, right? Or average. And the, basically very top end of lightweight 9 millimeter. So 115, you're talking just below or just above 1,200 feet per second. Like that's about nominal, right? So you took 1,200 feet per second of the lightest 9 millimeter and then took basically a mid-range weight for 45, 185 to 230, so 200, and put that into one that actually gave you more capacity than 45. That was monumental. Okay. And it was very, very popular, very powerful. If you ever shot a full, like legitimate, 200 grain, 1,200 foot per second, 10 millimeter load.
What is the capacity for 10 mil?
So like, all things being equal, standard full size capacity for a 9 millimeters, 17, 10 millimeters, 15. So you only lose, 2,
Plus one.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus one. Yep. 17 plus 1, 15 plus 1, 45. You're talking 13 to 12 plus 1. You're a little bit farther under there, but so anyway, that was a lot to like about it. And then at the time, a few things went on in development. Of course, like I said, it was popular. You had only a few guns chambered in 10 millimeter that could handle it. But before we get to that, there was a point that I wanted to make we didn't discuss. So 10 millimeter, being based on the 40 G&A, has a parent case of 30 Remington.
Yeah.
So we actually have a tie-in to 10 millimeter.
Which is a rifle cartridge.
It's a rifle cartridge.
Yeah.
So 30 Remington was offered at the same time period as 35 Remington. People are a little bit more familiar with that, especially because of, similarities with 360 Buckhammer. But anyways, and caliber. So not in caliber. Anyway, similarities, right? But 30 Remington and 35 Remington were offered very, very early 1900s with the Model 8 Remington semi-automatic rifle, one of the first semi-automatic rifles made, popular. And those two Remington offerings were designed to directly compete with the 30-30 Winchester. Just to put into context.
How old?
Yeah, how old and also how significant this was. I mean, you're talking about a 30 caliber rifle round that they literally cut to load into a handgun. So off the bat, you already have a platform, a concrete foundation for high power, right? I mean, it's just a strong, durable, robust round from development. So kind of interesting, kind of an interesting feature there. So anyway, fast forward back to what we were talking about after 10 millimeter in 1983 was adopted, as like a legitimate round.
Right.
You only had a few guns that were chambered in it. The most popular being the Bren 10.
Which
Sonny Crockett.
they used in Miami Vice.
That's exactly right. So everybody Everybody knows the super cool Galco like shoulder holster and all that kind of stuff. If you watch Miami Vice, at the time that was groundbreaking technology. That would be the equivalent of, I mean, I don't know. Literally, it was just the most high tech, up to date technology of the time. And the Bren 10 was a very low production number gun. Everything regarding 10 millimeter was rushed. Once it came into scope, people bought it. They were interested in it, and people were actually even sending Bren 10s to distributors without magazines, just so they could have it on the shelf.
So they could see it and hold it and look at it.
Which is a wild concept.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how successful that would have been, and it wasn't, because the Bren 10 actually, it went defunct. The company that made it went bankrupt fairly shortly thereafter. So
yeah, well, that makes sense. Don't put handguns without magazines in the stores, guys.
Especially yeah. So anyways, cool gun though, developed off the CZ75, beefed up. At the time too, really a lot of people argue like what saved that cartridge was the introduction of the Colt Delta Elite, which is a 1911 chambered in 10 millimeter. That was a little bit more popular, a little bit higher production just because of the Colt name. And then you had a couple others. The most prominent 10 millimeter handgun of the time being the Smith & Wesson 1076, which actually ended up being the gun that the FBI adopted the 10 millimeter with. So rolling into that, we come back to a very important date in handgun development.
And we keep coming back to it every time.
It's like, have you ever seen Back to the Future?
Yes.
Episode 2, where like they're in the garage and like the bad time when they go back to the future, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's like, I think it's literally, isn't it 1986 or 1984 or 1986?
It's in the 80s.
I think it's 86. Anyways, I could be totally wrong, not to get hung up on that, but they're like, this must be like the space-time continuum. That's literally 1986.
That's crazy, yeah.
So if that is, I'm going to go home tonight and look it up, and I'm going to have a little moment. I'm going to be like, oh my gosh. Anyways, so, wow. Rerail Leland. Anyway, so the 1986 FBI Dade shootout was a pretty big event. It was a pretty catastrophic change in the way people thought about handguns. So, of course, the 86 shootout, the FBI, learning from that in an attempt to get a better metric on how to measure terminal performance in handguns and rifles, developed the FBI protocol, which of course we still use today. It's the standard in the industry. Also, at the same time, they developed, or they were interested in adopting a cartridge that was standardized and that was more powerful than 9mm, basically. And at the time, they were also using revolvers, I believe 38 specials. And anyways, they needed something that at the time, like we said, 9mm wasn't taken quite as serious. They wanted something that they thought was more effective. Now, keep in mind, I've like read on multiple places that I think they had like an accuracy, like hit rate in the shootout from the FBI agents of like 15%. So maybe it wasn't so much the cartridge, but it's like the training.
Yeah.
You know, you be the judge. Right. But anyways, they wanted something that was more effective when they actually did hit 15% of the time. So that was where they looked at the 10mm, because of course it was popular. Think back to all the guns they were developing. Jeff Cooper, who was a known person in the industry at the time for combat instruction, was the endorser of it. I mean, it was a lot going for it. So anyway, 10mm was adopted by the FBI. And 3 short years after that, they started looking at alternatives because 10mm was so powerful that it made it very difficult for certain shooters to pass their qualification testing with it, whereas they would have been able to with a 38 or a 9. So,
yeah, the recoil.
Right. And 10mm does have more recoil. So anyway, at the time, the FBI, chambered in 10mm, were carrying the 1076 Smith & Wesson, and they approached Federal Ammunition, our sister company, to develop a downloaded version of 10mm called 10mm Light. So I got tongue-tied there again. Anyway, the 10mm Light load was basically just a slightly compromised version, but the same overall length as a 10mm. Smith & Wesson did their behind the scenes homework and determined that you could get a similar ballistic performance if you shorten the case to what would then become 40 Smith & Wesson.
Yeah.
At the 10 millimeter light. So anyway, that's how you get 40 Smith & Wesson. And there's still prominence in 40 Smith & Wesson today. Most, at the time, 40 Smith & Wesson became the primary, of course, for the FBI and then a lot of law enforcement agencies as well. Nowadays, it's pretty much been relegated back to 9 millimeter just because we know now that 9 millimeter in its current form is as effective in almost every way to a lot of other common handgun calibers. So.
Yeah, if you haven't listened yet, we do have a 9mm Reign Supreme episode where we talk about how dominant it is. So
there's that. 10 millimeter made pretty big waves when it came out. I'll just add one thing else too. Forgot to mention earlier, but as far as cartridges that use 10 millimeter as their parent, 10 millimeter is actually going off like what we were saying with it making a pretty big waves.
Yeah.
You have 357 SIG, which is a 10 millimeter neck down to a 9 millimeter bullet, 35 caliber bullet. Federal Premium was actually also instrumental in the development of that cartridge. 40 Smith & Wesson, of course, too. But something that was really cool, and I've seen it before in a museum, is 224 Boss, which...
the Boss.
Yeah. We've talked about it before. And if you don't know what it is, you should look it up. 224 BOZ. And it is a 22 caliber bullet put into a 10 millimeter neck down shell. So it looks
fake.
It looks fake. Yeah, it looks like a 2-year-old's rendering of a bullet or a cartridge rather. And you're talking about a 50 grain bullet traveling at like 2,500 feet per second.
Yeah. So
it's pretty wild.
Which varmint hunters would kill for now.
Yeah. It's super cool. And it's a 10 millimeter, like 10 millimeter packaging. That'd be super neat. But anyway, that was a Wildcat. It did never take off, but it was put into testing in the same government program that 5.7x28 FN came from. So high velocity, low weight, armor penetrating.
Was like the craze.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was at the NRA Whittington Center over the summer, and if you're ever out there in Raton, New Mexico, you got to stop in there and look at it because they have a really cool and fairly comprehensive library, like pull-out drawers of cartridges. And in their handgun Wildcats, they've got 224 Boss, which is kind of neat. So I had read about it before, but never seen it until then. But anyways, so going back off that, 10 millimeter has made some waves. Nowadays, there are some contracts that still call for 10 millimeter, primarily in European countries, and I believe there's a SWAT contract that still utilizes it. I know there's some submachine guns that were chambered in it, and actually in development, they actually chambered a 45 caliber Thompson submachine gun in 10 mil. They, down.
That is cool.
And tested it in there. That was kind of neat. But the nowadays, it's not so much prevalent in like FBI and like all these contract scenes. It's more hunting, self-defense, and hunting self-defense. So yeah.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask because it's, heavier bullet, faster velocity. It sounds like a competition shooter's dream. Yeah,
it could be. Some people might choose to. The thing about competition handgun, it's different between different disciplines. But you've got your major and minor power factors. Minor's like 9 millimeter, like standard 9 millimeter Luger. Major is going to be your basic entry to major power factor is 40 Smith & Wesson, which just for everybody who doesn't know, major power factor is one way to get higher scored points. So it's a score multiplier.
Oh, okay.
You have a little bit more recoil, but each hit you get higher, it helps your score. So anyways, and that, like I said, that's in certain jurisdictions within action shooting, the action shooting world. But 10 millimeter is going to get you that major, but you're going to have more recoil than 40 Smith & Wesson. So, and it's a little heavier. It's longer too. The guns are typically a little bigger. And it is higher pressure as well. So typically people just stay back with 40 just because it's like you get major, but you don't get too much extra recoil.
Yeah, and when you shoot that many rounds off in like one small period of time, recoil like really adds up.
It adds up for sure, especially guys who shoot a lot and they're really trying to trim down their time between shots. So you could. It's not recommended. When I first got into action pistol shooting, like I said, I like 10 millimeters. So I was like, oh, can I use my 10 mil? And they were like, dude, like, no, don't use that. Like, that's ridiculous. So.
They being like our friends.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, Leland and I shot our first 3-gun match together.
Yep.
So they meaning us. That's hilarious. I love that everyone was like, please don't bring it.
Yeah.
But it is, kind of the perfect gun for self-defense. I mean, it's not really concealable because, like you said, it's usually a bigger gun.
I'm not a huge guy, but in the winter, with the good, with good clothing that can conceal it, like I'll carry a 10 millimeter. I'll carry a full-size 10 millimeter if I can get away with it, just because.
If you can conceal it properly.
If you can conceal it, right, it's an effective conceal carry situation, sure. But, heck yeah, you can. And I'll tell you, as far as like, like a bedside gun, especially somebody in my position where, in my living situation, having a handgun is maybe a little bit better of a choice than having a really, really powerful rifle or something like that. 10 millimeter is not a bad option for that. And of course, we offer a couple offerings that would be a great stopgap for that as well.
Yeah.
Specifically designed for that. But it's fairly versatile. So, I guess probably the first thing we could talk about is Core-Lokt handgun. Yeah. And it's...
for those of you who don't know, also, all of Remington's 10 millimeter options are cased in nickel-plated cases.
Yeah, that's right. So it's just an added, actual performance increase. And then also they look really good. Like, I mean, full metal jacket, UMC, brass bullet, nickel case. I mean, we were talking about it before this. It just looks neat and unique.
It looks nice, yeah.
So that's our UMC line. So there you go. I mean, if you want to shoot plink at the range, you don't want to break the bank with some of the higher performance, terminally performing bullets, you can use our full metal jacket UMC, 180 grain, and break your gun in, shoot at the range, have fun. I mean,
it'll knock down steel.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
It'll knock the heck out of steel.
Yeah.
So, now, as far as, hunting, Core-Lokt handgun, which we just released here this previous 2024 SHOT Show, we have a 200 grain offering, our heaviest 10 millimeter offering, and that's going to be excellent for, basically hunting whitetail if you wanted to, or whatever you wanted to utilize it for, of course, so long as it's an ethical shot. But that's a great offering. Core-Lokt bullet, of course. So, again, that also wouldn't be a bad option for self-defense. I mean, you're going to talk about a lot of energy as well. And
for 4-legged creatures, maybe more than 2-legged creatures.
Yeah, for sure. And then even if you wanted to use for 4-legged creatures some of our 2-legged creature bullets, right? So like our Golden Sabers. So we've got Golden Saber bonded and defense. Get that right side up. And you can, get the traditional Golden Saber profile bullet performance and all. Of course, your 12 to 18 inches of calibrated organic ballistic shell penetration out of both. Bonded, giving you that added benefit of having jacket and core retention by our,
good weight retention.
Chemical flux core bonding. Just through a little bit better barrier performance and your drywalls and your plyboards. So there's that added benefit as well. And again, those are all terminally performing bullets. So you can apply those to a lot of things. However, of course, bonded Golden Saber and Golden Saber being, more optimized for 2-legged and FBI protocol. And
all of these are, the hollow point options are all made to stop.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's a hollow point. Terminal performance is designed to, it's designed to stop and your target deliver all of its, healthy energy and then expand to lethal expansion. And I can tell you after shooting all of these, they're very lethal. The performance is consistent. And then, also expansion in a 10 millimeter with it being a little faster is fairly significant too. So now I will say too, especially within the past year and a half, 2 years, you've seen a lot of firearm manufacturers introduce more and more guns chambered in 10 millimeter automatic. So, or 10 mil auto. So, you have a lot of handguns. Glock, of course, being one that's popular and has had one for a long time. Smith & Wesson, SIG, a lot of other guns. 1911s, a lot of 1911s chambered in 10 millimeter. And then even some PCCs, the CMMG Banshee, just to name one of them. I mean, there's plenty out there.
Yeah.
And good options. I mean, even High Point has a 10 millimeter carbine.
Yeah, I'm going to say if I ever become a PCC shooter, which is very unlikely, I would probably get a 10 mil PCC.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be super cool. And you could utilize that gun you could even hunt with that gun if you wanted. So, yeah, I mean, some options there. And I can tell you in R&D, we got a lot of things coming down the pipe I think people are going to be excited about. And I know I am, even, myself having a use for multiples of them. So, and then one application that I didn't mention that is also very popular, and I think a lot of people think of 10 millimeter being applicable for is, like grizzly bear defense, for example, or dangerous game defense. So, I know you're a really big hunter and you like carrying a sidearm. 10 millimeter, deep penetrating full metal jacket even is an excellent option for that. Right?
Yeah, I do. I go archery elk hunting in Colorado a lot, and I've been followed by mountain lions multiple times. Yeah. So I carry a handgun. I think it's important for people who are out in the woods carrying a handgun. Absolutely.
I mean, you don't know, you have to be prepared, right? Yeah. And it's an excellent choice for that just because of the terminal performance. So yeah, great option there. My family, we like to take trips out west every year. And we do a lot of hiking. And, all the big national parks. Right. And I carry my 10 millimeter, designed for penetration to get the most optimal penetration for what we've got. And I feel a lot more confident with that. You can get the job done with other calibers, of course. But that's typically what it is, because at the end of the day, your hot 10 millimeter is going to give comparable performance to middle range 357 Magnum. And that's a Magnum revolver, right? That's kind of your entry level Magnum revolvers, and it's healthy. So a lot of capability.
Yeah. You strike me as someone actually who would be really interested in handgun hunting, just because you've stressed to me how more personable you feel when you shoot a handgun versus when you shoot a rifle. Oh yeah. I have never done handgun hunting, and I'm not sure I ever will. But I think the first time I shoot a 10 mil, it'll be core-locked handgun.
Oh, heck yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and I think, if you were able to take animal for animal and, of course, if it was ethical kill, like just being able to harvest an animal with a handgun, I feel like would be a really involved and skilled experience. I mean, handgun shooting is not easy. No. That is, I would say, the hardest platform to shoot. I don't know if you could ever really master it either. And
people try.
And there's some close. Dang good people out there. Yeah. I'm sure somebody could totally make me put my foot in my mouth about that. But anyway, I think I think being able to utilize a handgun, which a lot of people do. I mean, we even talked about one of our first episodes about handgun ammo. We talked about people hunting lions with revolvers. Yes, yeah. Scoped revolvers. I mean, that's freaking awesome. But anyway, being able to do that, and you can even have revolvers chambered in 10 millimeter. So you have multiple platforms you could utilize for that. There are hunting 10 millimeter designed, or 10 millimeter semi-automatic handguns designed for hunting. I mean, it's out there and people do it. So,
and it's kind of on the rise right now, to be honest.
It is. Yeah. It is both from a handgun and ammunition standpoint. So, and of course, we're doing development to make sure that we're keeping up with the times as well. So, yeah. Well, 10 millimeter, yay or nay? Oh, I would definitely say yay. So.
Yay. I can't wait to get my hands on one and actually shoot one myself.
Oh, yeah. It's fun. It's a good time. First shot, when I went and shot this weekend, it was just, instant. I was like, I like this.
You're like, this is it. Can't blame you. Well, there you have it, guys. Remington is on the rise. Like, comment, subscribe, and be sure to share this podcast with your hunting or shooting buddies. If you have any questions for me or Leland here, you can email us at podcast@remington.com. Thanks for listening.